Standing at Great Uncle Earl's graveside, Mom leans over during the eulogy and whispers loud enough for the whole front row to hear. Try not to ask anyone for money today, Jolene. It's a funeral, not a fundraiser. Relatives shift uncomfortably. A cousin stifles a gasp. I don't flinch. I just stare straight ahead at the casket. She had no idea that the house we were all going back to for the repast already had my name on the deed. My name is Jolene Calloway. I'm 34 years old, and I live in Richmond, Virginia. I work full-time as a property manager for a mid-size rental company. My family likes to call it glorified maintenance work. I'm the eldest of 3 daughters born to Diane and Robert Calloway. Everything in our family orbits around my younger sister, Tessa. She's a pharmaceutical sales rep married to Grant Whitfield, a dentist. Tessa is the one they always praised. She's the one with the house in the nice subdivision, the one whose Christmas card made the fridge every single year. My middle sister Nora moved to Portland years ago and keeps her distance. She's the quiet defector nobody talks about. Me? I spent a decade being the family's unpaid coordinator. I planned the holiday meals. I managed my parents' medical appointments. I house sat. I dog sat. And I endured constant reminders that I never quite reached my potential. I wasn't the daughter with the big ring or the fancy job title. But I had something none of them knew about, and it was worth more than all their opinions combined. If your family ever treated your hard work like it was invisible, like you were just the person who showed up and helped, subscribe to this channel. Drop a comment and tell me what you did that nobody noticed. I see you. Let's go. Great Uncle Earl Calloway passed away at 81. He was a quiet, frugal, retired postal worker who lived alone in a modest but well-maintained 3-bedroom brick house in Richmond's Church Hill neighborhood. That neighborhood has been gentrifying fast. But Earl didn't care about property values. He cared about his porch, his pipe, and the people who bothered to sit with him. Earl was always kind to me. When I was broke after a bad breakup 5 years ago, he let me stay in his guest room for 4 months. No rent, not a single condition. I repaid him the only way I knew how. I mowed his lawn every week. I drove him to his doctor visits. I brought him Sunday dinners. And I sat with him on that porch for hours talking about everything and nothing. And I was the only family member who visited him regularly. The only one who knew he liked his coffee with 2 sugars and a little bit of cream, not milk. Everyone else had excuses. I had a key to his front door. At the funeral repast, held right there in Earl's house, my mother started her performance. I could hear her from the hallway. She was in the kitchen with Tessa and Grant, and her voice carried the way it always does when she's talking about money. That house is probably worth $280,000 now with how the neighborhood's changed, she said. We could sell it and split things properly. Grant was already on his phone, not even pretending to grieve. I'd get an appraiser in there by next week, he said. Oh, no sense letting it sit. I walked in mid-conversation, carrying a tray of deviled eggs and cornbread I'd been up since 5 in the morning making. I set the tray on the counter and quietly asked, "Has anyone even read Uncle Earl's will yet?" My mother turned to me with that look, that patient, pitying look she's been perfecting since I was 12. "Jolene, honey, the adults are talking about finances. This isn't really your area." Tessa laughed softly behind her wine glass. Grant didn't look up from his phone. I set the tray down carefully. I said nothing. I walked out of the kitchen. What no one in that room knew, what I myself had been sitting on for 6 weeks, was that Uncle Earl didn't just leave a will, but he transferred the deed of the house directly into my name 3 months before he died through a living transfer with the help of his personal attorney. It wasn't part of the estate. It wasn't up for discussion. The house was already mine. 2 days after the funeral, I found out my mother had created a family group chat called Earl's Estate. She deliberately left me out. Nora, all the way in Portland, screenshotted the whole thing and sent it to me privately. I sat on the edge of my bed scrolling through the messages. Diane, Tessa, and Grant were discussing timelines for selling the house, splitting proceeds between the family, and Grant was recommending his friend as a real estate agent. They had it all figured out. My name appeared only once in the entire thread. Mom wrote, "Jolene doesn't need to be involved. She'd probably just want to move into it and we'd never get her out." I read that line 4 times. I put my phone face down on the nightstand. The apartment was so quiet, I could hear the refrigerator humming in the kitchen. That hum felt louder than anything my mother had ever said to me, and she had said a lot. The following Sunday, I showed up to family dinner. I don't know why I still went to those things. Habit, maybe. Or maybe some stupid part of me still wanted to belong. The table was full. Aunts, cousins, Tessa's in-laws. The dining room smelled like pot roast and furniture polish. Mom had set out the good china, the kind she only uses when she wants an audience. Halfway through the meal, she brought up a car repair I'd mentioned the week before. She didn't bring it up with concern. She brought it up like evidence. "See? This is why I worry about Jolene," she said, loud enough for every person at that table to hear. 34 and still living paycheck to paycheck. Earl probably felt sorry for her. That's why he let her hang around. I felt my jaw tighten. Tessa didn't miss her cue. "She basically used Uncle Earl's house as a free hotel," Tessa said. "At least the rest of us had dignity." The table went quiet. Forks paused midair. I didn't look up. I gripped my fork under the table so hard my knuckles ached. But across the table, my cousin Willa caught my eye. She didn't say a word. She just gave me this look, this small nod, like she was telling me to hold on. I excused myself early, thanked the host, smiled politely, walked to my car, and then I sat in the driver's seat for 10 minutes. No music, no phone, just silence. Just the sound of my own breathing slowly steadying. 1 week later, my mother and Tessa showed up at my apartment unannounced. They knocked like they owned the place. When I opened the door, they walked right in and sat at my kitchen table without being invited. Mom pulled a printed document from her purse and smoothed it flat. Grant had drafted it. It was called a family agreement. It wasn't legally binding, but it was designed to look official, full of formal language and signature lines. It stated that all parties agreed to split the proceeds of Earl's house equally among Diane, Jolene, Tessa, and Nora, with Diane receiving the largest share as next of kin. They pushed it toward me. Mom tapped the page with her fingernail. "This is fair, Jolene. You wouldn't even know what to do with a house like that." Tessa leaned back in her chair and folded her arms. "You don't have to feel guilty about getting a cut. We're being generous, including you." I looked at the paper. I looked at my mother. I said simply, "I'm not signing anything." The warmth left my mother's face like someone flipped a switch. Tessa threw her hands up. "Unbelievable." They stood, they gathered their things, and on her way out the door, Mom said, "Earl would be ashamed of how selfish you've become." I closed the door behind them. I locked it. Then I walked to my filing cabinet, pulled open the second drawer, and stared at the deed. My name, printed clean and clear. I ran my thumb across it. Then I closed the drawer and went to bed. What my family didn't know was that my years of being underestimated had made me meticulous. I didn't just have the deed, I had a fortress of documentation. 3 months before Earl passed, when he first told me about the house transfer, I began keeping records of everything. Earl, still sharp-minded and fully aware of what he was doing, had recorded a video on my phone. He was sitting in his favorite recliner, the brown leather one with the worn armrests. He looked right into the camera and explained exactly why he was leaving the house to me. "Jolene is the only one who showed up," he said. "Not for the house, not for money. She showed up for me." His voice was steady. His eyes were clear. No one could watch that video and call him confused. I also had 2 years of text messages from my mother and Tessa, showing a clear pattern. Yeah, every time Earl needed something, they sent me. Groceries, prescriptions, yard work. They refused to do it themselves but were now claiming credit for his care. One text from Mom read, "Can you go check on Earl this weekend? Tessa and I have the lake house." I saved every single one. I had the signed, notarized deed transfer. I had the attorney's records. And I had Earl's handwritten letter tucked inside a sealed envelope addressed to the family, which he gave me with one instruction: open this when they come for what isn't theirs. And I had one more thing: a quiet relationship with Earl's attorney, Mr. Leonard Pratt, who had assured me in plain language, "This transfer is ironclad. They can make noise. They cannot make a claim." I wasn't waiting to react. I was waiting for the right moment. My cousin Willa Calloway is 37, a divorced single mom who works as a paralegal in Norfolk. She grew up alongside me, and she knows exactly what Diane is like because Diane's sister, Willa's mother, was treated the same way in the previous generation. The patterns in this family don't change. They just pick new targets. Willa had always been quiet at family events, blending into the background the way people learn to when drawing attention means drawing fire. But she saw my face at that Sunday dinner. She texted me that night. "I know that look. You don't have to take it. And you don't have to do it alone." That text changed everything. Willa became my confidant and my strategic advisor. As a paralegal, she helped me organize every document I had. She reviewed the deed transfer line by line and checked for any vulnerabilities. There were none. "Well, it's legally airtight," she told me over the phone. "But I'm warning you. They're going to escalate. Diane doesn't lose. She bulldozes." She was right. Grant hired a probate attorney to investigate Earl's estate, claiming potential undue influence over an elderly man. It was a disgusting accusation, and they knew it. Mom began calling extended relatives with a story she had constructed piece by piece, like building a lie out of bricks. She told them I had manipulated Earl in his final months and tricked him into signing papers. Tessa posted a vague but pointed Instagram story that read, "When people take advantage of the elderly, karma always finds them." My phone started ringing constantly. Some family members were sympathetic. Most were accusatory. Nora called from Portland, her voice careful and strained. She was torn. But I could hear it. She was leaning toward believing Mom's version. Then Diane made her boldest move. She showed up at Earl's house with a locksmith. She was going to change the locks. A neighbor saw it happen and called me immediately. I called Mr. Pratt. Pratt called the police. By the time the officers arrived, Mom was standing on the front porch arguing with a locksmith who wanted nothing to do with a property dispute. She was told to leave. She was told not to return. She stood on the sidewalk, humiliated, in front of neighbors who had known Earl for 30 years. The stage was set. I arranged a family gathering at Uncle Earl's house, my house. I called Mom and told her I wanted to talk things through and find a fair solution. I used those exact words because I knew they were the words she wanted to hear. She believed she had won. She showed up with Tessa, Grant, and Grant's probate attorney, a thin man in a gray suit who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. My father, Robert, came too. He stood near the door, quiet and uncomfortable the way he always is when Mom runs the room. The living room was Earl's, unchanged. The shelves still held his books. The air still carried the faint trace of his pipe tobacco, sweet and woody, like he had just stepped out for a walk. I sat in Earl's recliner. Willa stood beside me. Mom opened with a rehearsed speech about family unity and fairness. She used words like reasonable and moving forward together. Then she slid the family agreement across the coffee table one more time, this time with Grant's attorney backing her up. "This is the reasonable path, Jolene. Sign it. And we move forward as a family." I didn't touch the paper. I looked at my mother and said calmly, "Before I respond, I think Uncle Earl should speak for himself." I picked up the remote and played Earl's video on the living room TV. The room went silent. Earl's voice filled that house one last time, warm, deliberate, and absolutely clear. I left this house to Jolene because she was the only one who treated me like a person, not an obligation. Diane, you didn't visit me once in my last year. Tessa, you sent a card at Christmas. Jolene brought me soup on Tuesdays. Nobody moved. Mom's face drained of color. Tessa leaned toward Grant and whispered something. Grant's attorney shifted in his seat and looked down at his briefcase. I let the silence sit for a moment. Then I produced the notarized deed, and the attorney's letter confirming the legal transfer, and the printed text message screenshots showing Mom and Tessa delegating all of Earl's care to me while taking none themselves. I read the most damning text aloud. Mom to Tessa. Just have Jolene do it. She doesn't have anything better going on. I looked directly at my mother. You used me to take care of him. You mocked me for being close to him. And now you want to profit from a relationship you couldn't be bothered to have. Then I opened Earl's sealed, handwritten letter. The envelope was old and slightly yellowed. I unfolded the page and read the final line aloud. To my family, you get what you gave. Jolene gave everything. The rest of you gave excuses. Grant's attorney quietly closed his briefcase, turned to Grant, and said, "There's no case here." Mom stood up. She was visibly shaking. "This isn't over," she said. I looked at her. "It's been over, Mom. You just didn't notice." She left. Tessa and Grant followed. The front door closed behind them. But my father lingered. He stood in the hallway for a long moment, looking at the framed photos on Earl's wall. Then he looked at me. His eyes were wet. "Earl was right," he said. Then he walked out. I moved into Uncle Earl's house. I renovated it slowly, room by room, keeping his recliner and his porch swing exactly where they were. I planted a garden in the backyard, tomatoes and herbs and sunflowers, something Earl always talked about but never got around to doing. The probate challenge was dropped. Grant's attorney advised him there was zero legal standing. Mom told extended family a cleaned-up version of what happened, but it didn't matter. The video and Earl's letter had already circulated through the cousins. Her reputation as the family matriarch quietly fractured, like a crack in a wall that everyone pretends not to see. Tessa sent a short, awkward text months later. "Congrats on the house." I replied with a thumbs-up emoji. Nothing more. Nora called from Portland. She apologized for doubting me, and she visited for a weekend. We sat on Earl's porch together and didn't talk about Mom. My father began visiting on Saturday mornings. He brings donuts. We sit at the kitchen table and talk about small things. We don't discuss what happened. We don't need to. Willa and I grew closer, the two cousins who survived the family by choosing each other. Uncle Earl didn't just leave me a house. He left me proof. A proof that the people who show up quietly are the ones who deserve the most. I spent 34 years being invisible to my own family. Turns out the one person who saw me, who really saw me, made sure I'd never be overlooked again. If you've ever been the one who showed up, who did the work, made the calls, sat by the bedside, while everyone else disappeared and then showed up for the inheritance, this story was for you. I want to hear from you. Drop your story in the comments. Tell me what you gave that nobody acknowledged. And click Hype to help this story reach others who need it. If this story made you feel something real, you're in the right place. This channel is for people who've been through it, who know what it's like to be underestimated and come out the other side. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Hit the bell. Share this with someone who needs to hear it tonight. I'll see you in the next story.